Mike DeCourcy's Friday bracket, hot off the presses. 8 Big Ten teams in, with Michigan knocking on the door. Purdue, Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio State, all top 4 seeds. Iowa, Rutgers, Indiana, far more tenuous. And then Michigan is among the first 4 out at this point, despite that win last night. Mike joins us now for his weekly visit. And Mike, let's start with last night's game. I want to start with the team that lost first, Iowa. The metrics love them. They are an offensive juggernaut, and that's part of the reason why. That being said, they still do not have a quad 1 win. What does Iowa have to do here down the stretch to guarantee themselves a spot? I mean, can you get in without winning a quad 1 game?
Well, they and North Carolina are trying to test that theory, and it's hard to say whether the committee would cross that line, especially when you consider that it's one thing to not have a quad 1 win on February 1st or 12th or 18th, but it's another to not have one when you get to Selection Sunday and you've had the 2 weeks, 3 weeks left in the regular season and the conference tournament and still not managed to get that. I think at that point, the door might close on them. And they've got chances, obviously, but they have to play much better than they did on Thursday night. They do have that at Ohio State. They get Michigan State on their court. That's a team that, although really strong, is not overwhelming offensively. So maybe that's a game where they can use their offensive might to get the win. The at Michigan game, they can maybe get a little revenge. At Illinois, going to be tough, but those are all quad 1 opportunities. Clearly, they can't afford to do what Carolina did, losing to Pitt. They can't take the Nebraska loss or the Northwestern. That can't happen for them. If they do, then in that circumstance, they're in deep trouble.
All right, let's focus on the team that won last night in Michigan. Their schedule is brutal here going forward. They're all quad 1 games with the exception of Rutgers. And when you say, you're all quad 1 other than Rutgers, I mean, the way Rutgers is playing right now, that's hardly a breather. The positive is, as we look at it, you get 4 in a row at home here for Michigan. And again, a lot of the quirks of the scheduling due to games that were rescheduled due to obvious COVID issues. So what do you see when you look at Michigan, who you have just on the outside looking in right now?
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to get mad at Michigan if they don't win the 2 road games. But if you go 3-1 at home, I think they find their way inside the field. Because first of all, Rutgers is, it's not, I use the term elimination game. It's probably not accurate because they're not really truly eliminating one another. But it is, you're basically playing your competition. And so that game matters. And the committee looks at those. It usually a little bit more so even when we get closer to Selection Sunday, but they look at those games because they know each side goes in understanding that this is the kind of team I have to prove I can beat to be considered. So that's a big game for them. And then, of course, the heavyweights of the conference, the teams at the top, if you can do well against them, like I said, about 3-1 at home in that stretch, I'm not sure that they find their way outside at that point. There may be a struggle then for other Big Ten teams. I don't think this is a year in which the Big Ten is going to wind up with 9 teams like they did a year ago. But there's still room for 7 or 8.
Well, I have Rutgers as a 1 seed at this point. Speaking of teams that are going to make it in, I know that's not where the bracketologists see them, but I see them, I mean, in all seriousness, I don't see how they can not be in the tournament right now. I mean, you have 6 quad 1 wins, which to me is just a staggeringly high number. I guess my point is this. And I know you have them as an 11, and you're the messenger, right? All you're trying to do is simulate the process. And I do think people need to understand that, because sometimes people go on Twitter and they get mad at you, or they get mad at Joe or Jerry Palm or any of those guys and say, well, how can you have that? All you're trying to do is say, I'm looking back historically at what the committee has done, and I'm extrapolating based on this year. But I look at this team, Mike, and I say, with all the teams that haven't beaten anybody out there, how are they only in 11? Like, is there something wrong with this process? And again, I know you're going to tell me about losing to Lafayette and losing to UMass. Like, I know why. But are the biases that are built into the system wrong? If they're
No,
just
and I'll tell you why. They're playing fantastic basketball, but there have been football teams in the Big Ten that have gone through October, November, and just torn down the stretch. But we don't forget about what they did the first 3 weeks of the season. If you lose your first three and then all of a sudden you start beating Michigan and Penn State and Ohio State, say, then they don't say, okay, put them in the Rose Bowl. I mean, the games all count. And that's why Rutgers, at this point, is where they are. I think the question, it somewhat depends on how they take advantage of what they've built here and do they carry it forward. And at that point, if they win the kinds of games over the next 3 weeks that they have won over the past 3 weeks, at that point, I don't think they can put them at 11 because it's not fair to the upper level of the bracket. They want to protect the upper level of the bracket. That's what seeding is all about. You're trying to give the best road to the most accomplished teams. And if you're putting them in danger because Rutgers has proven once, and now let's say proves again by taking out 2 or 3 of those remaining teams, then at that point you're putting in jeopardy whoever is in this case it would be the 6th seed and then the 3 seed. Not really fair to them. So At that point, the committee has to start to think about where that Rutgers fits into the bracket, and it will be a complicated discussion.
Well, I certainly can't remember a team having a better 2 weeks than they've had from where they were, right? And they've, to your point, 4 more quad 1 games in a row here now, and 3 of them are on the road. So we'll see how they fare, but it's been pretty remarkable. The flip side of that would be Indiana. It seems like they have gone from close to a sure thing a couple of weeks ago to it being a little bit tenuous now. We know they've beaten Purdue, they've beaten Ohio State, so they have shown they can beat good teams. What do you think IU needs to do down the stretch to make sure that it remains in this field?
Well, the first ingredient in that is not making sure they don't, again, pull a Carolina losing to Pitt and fall to Maryland or Minnesota. And the Minnesota game is a road game, so that complicates it a little bit. But then they're going to need, I think, another high-quality win. And they may be asking a lot to beat Ohio State on the road or Purdue on the road, but I don't think it's asking too much to beat Rutgers at home. Again, same thing, same philosophy with that Michigan game, which is you're playing the team that you're trying to climb ahead of. You don't get to play somebody from, let's say, you don't get to play San Francisco. You don't get to play Belmont. They're not on your schedule. But there's Rutgers, and they're fighting for the exact same thing you are. So if you don't beat them, that's definitely a mark against you. I think that to me is maybe their most important game. Now, I sat there and Beyond a couple of weeks ago, and I circled that Northwestern game, and I said, this is your most important game. And then they end up having to suspend half the team. So they need to make sure that things like that don't happen again.
Yeah, 4 straight losses now for Indiana. They have not won a game this month, and it's the 18th of the month. So that's a little bit of an issue. Before we let you go, Purdue you had on the 2 line. Are they the only Big Ten team right now that has a realistic chance of getting a 1, or could someone else get there where they get really hot down the stretch?
Yeah, I think Wisconsin would have to completely tear all the way down the stretch and make the final, and even that might not get them there. Because the metrics have the doubts about them. And I think that to be a 1 seed, you pretty much have to cover every base. You've got to have Ken Pom locked. You have to have KPI locked. You have to have the quad locked. You have to have everything in place. And I don't think Wisconsin's ever this season is going to be able to build up the numbers to take care of the predictive metrics, the net, the Ken Pom, Sagarin, et cetera. They're not going to get there. So I think that's going to be hard for them. But Purdue, they have a chance. And it's really interesting because they, like some of the other teams, basically are playing all heavyweights down the stretch. Rutgers, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Indiana. So it's a team full of a schedule full of opportunities there. If they win all of those, and I know that's a lot to ask, but so is a number 1 seed a lot to attain. if they win all of those and go to the Big Ten final, I think there's a great shot they wind up on the one line. It's just a question of who makes room for them.
Jason Wright was an outstanding running back at Northwestern. He finished with over 4,000 all-purpose yards and 34 touchdowns during his time in Evanston, where he also served as a team captain. His outstanding college career led him to the NFL, where he played 7 seasons. Wright's most incredible accomplishments came after his playing career. He received his MBA from the University of Chicago and worked for several years in consulting. In August of 2020, he was named the president of the Washington football team. Not only did he become the first black person to hold the position, at 38 years old, he was also the youngest president in league history. Wright's outstanding achievements make him a big impact pioneer, class of 2022.
And Jason Wright, now the president of the Washington Commanders, renamed, is today's big interview. Jason joining us now. And Jason, we heard about what a groundbreaker you've been. The first black team president in the NFL, also the youngest black team president in the NFL. To what extent do you feel pressure in that role?
First of all, thanks for having me. And it's weird to be referred to as a pioneer, because I think there are so many people that paved the way where this was very much a natural transition for me, from football to business, to football and business together. You know, people like the Big Ten commissioner, who did in all things but name alone the same job that I'm doing now for the Minnesota Vikings, and changed the game for them. Right. So it's to those folks that I really owe this, and they're the real pioneers. But, you know, for me personally, I didn't have time to think about the momentous nature of this. We had a real transformation on our hands. We need to stabilize the organization and start rebuilding our season ticket member base. And so I just got back to the grind, and hopefully, more than anything, that will be my legacy: a transformed organization, a healthy season ticket member base, a stadium filled with burgundy and gold, a great new brand, and a new venue that's state of the art and people are excited about.
It is Black History Month. Your middle name is Gomillion. You are named after Charles Gomillion, who is a relative on your mom's side. Give us background on him and kind of the role that he played in civil rights.
Sure. Charles Good Gomillion was a professor at Tuskegee University, a historically black college and university. And he was more than a professor. He was also an activist. And he's responsible for the Gomillion versus Lightfoot case in the Supreme Court, which made it illegal to draw voting district lines based on racial demographics, a problem we still face today as a society. But he made racial gerrymandering illegal through the Supreme Court case that he pushed. And, you know, I recently got the privilege of getting to know more about my relative through Dr. Michael Lomax, who is the CEO of the United Negro College Fund. I worked with him in my previous job, and Charles Good Gomillion was a mentor to him. So I got some firsthand accounts of my relative, a true pioneer, through him, which was a really encouraging and a beautiful moment as I stepped into this role.
Who are your role models, Jason?
Well, Kevin Warren is one of them.
Yeah.
I lean on Kevin a ton for advice, not just in how to run a sports business, but in how to be a leader, how to be a person of character. My dad and my mom, they're role models to me. The sacrifice that they put in, the hard work that they did to insulate me from some of the challenges around me growing up, to allow me to focus on academics, to allow me to focus on football, to freely be a nerd, which materialized in me getting to where I am today. And then I'll throw one specific to my time at Northwestern, Randy Walker. My head coach during the time I was there. He's since passed, but he was somebody who called out my BS, who saw through my charisma and bluster and pushed me to be the best that I could be, both on the field and off the field. And really a lot of the lessons my parents tried to teach me came to fruition when Coach Walk brought them to bear in my life, and I miss him dearly.
What was your BS?
Oh, man, I didn't like to work that hard. I just didn't really like to work that hard. You know, I think like a lot of high school athletes, things tend to come naturally to you. And for the first time at Northwestern, I wasn't good enough. I got my position moved because we had so many running backs that were better than me. And I just didn't have it in me yet to grind and to build and to do the hard work to actually fight my way back in. Instead, I was just like, well, it doesn't work. The coaches are on some BS. They don't like me, blah, blah, blah. The kind of stuff that you can hear from athletes at times. Coach Walk, through a mix of hard criticism and targeted encouragement, called out the best parts of me. And eventually I won the starting position, and went on to have an NFL career, in large part because Coach Walk didn't let me settle into my default behaviors.
Let's talk a little bit about your time at Northwestern. So you got there in 2000, which was an amazing year for Northwestern, really a transformative team, and you were a small part of that Big Ten co-championship team in 2000. When you think about that season and kind of ushering in the no-huddle spread, which really hadn't been seen like that in college football, what's the memory that stands out the most in your mind?
I loved being a part of something with so much momentum. We were doing something new. The coaching staff was doing something new. The true spread zone scheme in the run game, the quick passes, like all the no huddle, all of that was fresh at the time. So it felt cool to be part of something that was a new movement and a new momentum, and honestly helped me to start to think about business and anything as an innovator, as somebody who's not afraid to do something different, because I was a part of it and I could see the early success of it. It also felt great to be in the flow and in a place where we just felt like we couldn't lose. I remember the 54-51 win over Michigan. Like, even when we were down, even when A-Train scored a touchdown to go up when it felt like it was all lost, like, we just didn't think we were going to lose. And that's a mindset that I carried over to business and that I carry over to us now. No matter what the challenges we're facing are, we know that with good people, with strong character, and with a good scheme, whether that's a business scheme or a football scheme, it's just a matter of time before you come out on top. And that sort of confidence breeds resilience. It allows you to take risks, and that's what that team was all about.
You mentioned eventually you did become the star running back on that team. Your last couple of years, you went over 1,000 yards in both of those years after Damian Anderson graduated. You were an academic All-American. You were a psychology major. At that point, you were pre-med. Yeah. How did you balance all of that?
I didn't sleep. I don't know.
That gets you a few hours back for sure, right?
That's right. In fact, my line name in my fraternity was Froze in Time, because they were like, I don't know how you manage all this time around you. I don't know how I did it, because I sure did invest academically. I invested on the football field because Coach Walk taught me that. And I definitely invested in my social life too. So I'm not sure how it all came together, but I'm grateful. Northwestern is one of those few places in all of academia that I feel has a true balanced student body. The kids there are brilliant, first and foremost. They're also focused on having a big impact on the world. It's a place where you've got a bunch of big thinkers, do-gooder mindset that's just freaking contagious. And you've got a great athletic program that has gone to the next level, especially in the football program under Coach Fitz. It's really a holistic place where excellence exists across every dimension. And so when you're a person who's attracted to excellence, who likes to be a part of great things, it's kind of hard to say no, and you just sort of sacrifice some sleep to make it happen.
To what extent do you still follow the team?
I certainly follow the team. Like I said, I think what Coach Fitz has done is he's built on, Coach Walk gave us a vision for what we could be. He established that we could compete consistently at a high level and started to attract the type of talent that can win championships. What Coach Fitz did is bring that into establishing a real program around Northwestern football. New facilities, a set of values that are core, a certain loyalty and commitment that comes from student athletes in a time where commitment is a bygone concept in collegiate athletics at times. So he's really built something of a substantive program that's almost spiritual in a sense. And I think that's the lasting value that's going to get us back to championships in the purple and white.
7 years in the NFL. you talk a lot about how frequently you were cut, especially early in your career. How did that help shape the person that you are?
It was huge for me. I talk about learning a little bit about fight and resilience under Coach Walk at Northwestern. But let's be honest, no matter where you are as a college athlete, you're still coddled. You're still coddled. When I was getting fired in the NFL, the first time it happened, I was with the Niners, and I came in from a 2-a-day practice. And my name was off my locker. All of my stuff was in a black trash bag. There was a sticky note that said, "Your taxi leaves in 30 minutes. Please leave your playbook here." I mean, it was so abrupt. I'm in the shower trying not to cry in front of other grown men, butt naked in the shower, right? It's just one of these things that abject in your face failure is a moment of truth for you as a professional, as an athlete. And what I learned during that period, and it happened again and again, getting cut by the Falcons and running out of money, moving in with my aunt and uncle, just trying to make ends meet. What happens during that time is that you have to find a way to recapture your swagger and reestablish your confidence. I would watch my highlight film until I knew I belonged again. And that habit of replaying your successes when facing abject failure is something I carried into business and helped me transition into business and become a partner at McKinsey & Company. And it's helped me navigate this role through the ups and downs in it to a point where now our season ticket member base is up 80%. We're ready to make some major investments in the guest experience around FedEx Field. And we're really going to kick ass and take names heading into this next year, both on and off the field. And that resilience that I developed during that time of getting fired is what fuels me.
I'm fascinated by your transition into business. Now, you made a very controversial decision because you went to Booth at the University of Chicago rather than going to Kellogg at Northwestern. Now, Chicago's an original Big Ten member, so I suppose they carry a little weight with us, and we'll let that fly. But then you worked for McKinsey, and there were projects there, I think, that kind of started pointing you towards where you are today, particularly around race in the workplace. Give us a sense of what you did there that resonated with you that you've carried forward.
Yeah, I mean, my whole lineage going back to my family, my dad as a civil rights activist turned business leader, has always been focused on economic equity in society. The sense, it's really founded in this belief that if intellect and talent and creativity are equally distributed to all people of all different races by God in equal measure, then if we don't see equal outcomes in society, we've got to assess what barriers are there that exist to those outcomes. And that's been a driving force of mine since I was in football and doing do-gooder work in the off seasons, helped me start charter school networks and things like that. It carried to my time at McKinsey, where I was able to establish an internal think tank within McKinsey that was focused on the racial wealth gap and ways to make sure that capital flows to all communities of all types so that the economic uplift allows us to see what we all believe should be in society, all people of all types and all census tracts thriving. And coming into this role was a great opportunity for me to go from talking about it to being about it as we embark on building a new venue, which is a 30-year economic development investment for the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. I can put our money where our mouth is in making sure that capital is flowing and elevating all sorts of folks in a big project like that.
Jason, I want to leave you with this. It's Black History Month, that obviously, as you're well aware, and we've been celebrating it here at the Big Ten Network and talking about the big impact pioneers, of which you are one of them. I think about the future, though, more so than history with you, just given how young you are and how much of your career is still ahead of you. As you think about the position you're in and those who will follow you, particularly people of color, what do you want them to learn from your story? And what do you want, like, kind of that legacy that you eventually leave, that'll be many, many years from now, to be, where when they learn about Jason Wright, they learn what?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think about my legacy that often. Like I said, I just try to do a good job in the role. And maybe that's the place to start. I want the folks who come after me, white, black, green, yellow, purple, to be able to say they turned it around. They built a high-performing organization on and off the field. They have championships to show for it, and they've got an invested, large season ticket member base that's excited about being present for that championship team. Like, if we're able to create that, that's probably the biggest thing I can do, because then people who might be hesitant, who might not have strong belief in Black intellect or Black talent, can be less hesitant about bringing someone on into a role like this who looks like me or talks like me or has perspectives like I do. I'd say the second thing that maybe is a part of that legacy is that we're able to have that sort of success with me being unapologetically Black, speaking about Black issues, coming with a perspective that might be informed by my ethnicity and my background and how that's shaped my experiences, and not being shy about that, speaking the way I want to in certain settings, and also using my inherent diversity to attract a diverse team, not just demographically, but by experience, so that we have a set of innovative minds who think differently about sports media and entertainment, building something really special. And if people see that that model works, that it gets outsized returns in terms of business and, importantly, championships, then at the end of the day, we might see more of that across the industry. And then I'd say the last thing is, like, I think I want me and my team to show that you can have fun doing this, that you can have a blast, that you can be joyful and youthful, a bit tongue-in-cheek, and that we can have a blast building an amazing organization.
Jason Wright, this has been phenomenal. You were a lot of fun to watch as a student athlete, and it has been incredible to see the arc of your career and just how wonderful it's been. Not a surprise in any way, but such a pleasure. Thanks so much for your time. Really great to talk to you.
Appreciate it, my friend.
Big news in the college football playoff today. You see Nicole Auerbach's tweet that the college football playoff will stay at 4 teams through the duration of its current contract. No expanded field until 2026 at the earliest. Bill Hancock, the executive director of the CFP, issued a statement within the last hour that said just that. And Nicole joins us now. Nicole, it feels like it was kind of headed in this direction here for a while after there seemed to be momentum perhaps to expand before this contract ended, but it just seemed like they had hit a logjam. Are you surprised at all that this is where it ended up?
I'm not. I'm only surprised that we didn't get there sooner. There were 3 days of meeting at the College Football Playoff National Championship, and everyone came out of that incredibly frustrated. And the question really was, why would you keep meeting at this point if you know that you're not going to get to a unanimous decision? And they needed a unanimous decision to break the contracts, to expand before 2026. And they knew they weren't going to get there. You had the ACC believes that now is not the right time to do any of this. They think that there's other issues in the instability in college sports that need to be addressed first. The Big Ten, we know, is really, married to this idea of having automatic qualifiers for Power 5 champions. So the Big Ten champ gets an automatic spot. You've also got the Rose Bowl and its considerations in this format that the Big Ten cares about, Pac-12 cares about, revenue distribution. There have just been a number of issues that led to this not being a unanimous decision. So it's not a surprise that they weren't able to get to this and have to table it until the contract's up, where at that point, you can look at whatever models. And honestly, we might still end up at a 12-team model, the one that they've been discussing. But I think they're going to sit on this for at least a year and then revisit these conversations for when the next contract actually needs to be decided.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you next. So maybe just give people a little clarification on that. So this is what we're going to have as a model for the next 4 years. We're going to have 4 teams. But we will know certainly well before this next, well before 2027, kind of where it's going. So give people a sense of kind of like what the time frame is on that and where you feel like they need to get to in order for us to make some sort of a change going forward, whether it be an 8-team or a 12-team model.
Right. So they are going to stay at 4 for the next 4 seasons. That is what was officially decided. They had been saying, we're running out of time. But now they officially said that. So in order to make changes for 2026 and onward, they will need to start meeting and having these same conversations. They still need to nail down a format and then take it to media partners. We do know there's interest in having multiple media partners and not just being ESPN this go around, to have, multiple people with the stake in this. And I believe that Bill Hancock has said that the negotiating window with ESPN begins October 2024. So again, you kind of work backwards from there for when they need to start working this through. And again, they may end up with the same model that they are discussing now, but it doesn't necessarily have to be at the same standard of being unanimous, because you could just have a majority of people feeling a certain way and saying, hey, do you want to be part of the playoff moving forward or not? But right now it had to be such a high standard. It had to be unanimous because there were so many contracts that needed to break. So we could end up getting to the exact same place just a little bit later than we think. But all the parties, including the Big Ten, will have felt like their input was part of it, that they were part of the process. And again, the multiple media partners is absolutely something to keep an eye on for that next iteration of that contract.
All right, well, I know we're going to have those conversations quite a bit here going forward, right? I mean, what we've done is we've tabled the immediate term issue, but as you outlined there, the long-term issue still remains. I can say with great confidence, Nicole, this is not the last time that you and I will discuss this, but I really appreciate you hopping on short notice just to clarify what happened today. Nicole Auerbach, thanks so much. U.S. and Canada both out of the Olympic hockey tournament. They were eliminated in the quarterfinals. Here's how the current Big Ten players in both of those teams fared. You see 7 goals in all. Ben Myers, Brendan Brisson leading the way with 2 apiece for the U.S. In fact, 6 of the Americans' 17 goals, by my count, were scored by Big Ten players. So that's pretty good. Paul Caponegri is with us. Disappointing, obviously, for Canada and the U.S. not to be able to play in the medal round. But what did you take from the performance of the Big Ten players?
I mean, they looked good. None of them looked out of place. I think it'll help their confidence. I really liked some of the guys. Ben Myers really stood out in the U.S. Matty Beniers. And then the 2 guys at the bottom of that screen were Owen Power and Brock Faber. They didn't have a lot of points, but they had the most ice time of any of their players on each team. So they showed out very well. My biggest disappointment is the fact that they do a shootout in the quarterfinals. Like, let the overtime go on. That's an argument for another day. But, we're in the quarterfinals you're going for medals here in the Olympics, and they're ending on a shootout, which doesn't really show hockey. And they do 3-on-3 in overtime. Let it go. They're bound to score. 3-on-3, there's a lot of chances. So that was my only gripe, but players showed out well.
Here's what's amazing. We sat here a few weeks ago and we wondered about the impact this might have, particularly on Michigan and Minnesota, right? Because they were missing key cogs. And yet now these guys are coming back, and Michigan's in first place and Minnesota's in second place, and they're both on these impressive win streaks. So what does it tell you about each of those 2 teams?
I mean, they're just ridiculously deep. I mean, I thought they would do well. I think at worst, I thought maybe they'd go 500 each, but neither team lost a game. Now, this weekend, I don't believe they're going to be back. Maybe Saturday's game. I mean, I don't know the travel, from Beijing to, especially Minnesota's at Penn State, which isn't exactly an easy place to travel into. So they might miss.
There are no non-stops from Beijing to State College.
I don't believe so. But you know what? Both teams, by winning all the games they did, like you said, they're in first and second now. Maybe there's a little less important, I wouldn't say importance, but to get them back quickly. I think the big thing is they're going to be back next week for the last regular season games, probably at full strength. Got their clocks back on track, and then they'll be full go for the playoffs. So I think that's what they're looking for the most.
2 big series this weekend. I want to touch on both of those.
Sure.
Ohio State going to Michigan. That is tonight and tomorrow. Tonight's game's on Big Ten Plus.
Right.
Tomorrow's game is on the Big Ten Network. It's a huge series in the conference race. Ohio State, and we sat here a week ago, Ohio State was the first place team in the league. So how things change here. What are you watching here on each side?
I think, for Ohio State, they actually, the first time had a little chink in the armor. It had gone 15 games without losing in regulation. And then you lose Friday night, and then they just got steamrolled Saturday. Minnesota played one of their best games, and they hadn't, they're missing, like we said, 3 guys. So with Ohio State, the only way they can get to the top is they need to sweep Michigan and for Minnesota to lose at Penn State. So, I don't know if that's a scenario that could happen. But they gotta. I think they need to win. This is their last weekend. They don't play the last regular season. They're that team that gets the bye. So I think Ohio State is to get a win after you don't want to go into the playoffs ever losing 4 straight. So winning at Yost, which will be difficult, but I think it'll get them back, mentally in the right spot.
Yeah, that's amazing what you said. I mean, you think about Ohio State had a loss in regulation in 2 months, then they lose 2 in 2 days. It's pretty crazy.
Changes in a heartbeat.
You have Minnesota and Penn State. Minnesota's coming off the sweep of Ohio State.
Yeah.
Now they go to Penn State, a series the Nittany Lions have had their way in lately. This is not a great Penn State team, but still, how dangerous is this for Minnesota?
It's dangerous. I think it's been 5 years since the day that the last time they won a game in Happy Valley. Penn State struggled, quite frankly, with the top 4 teams. The Big Ten's in 2 brackets, as you've seen that, is the top 4 and then the bottom 3. And Penn State's won 1 game all year out of 14 in regulation time. Yeah, they have a shootout win and an overtime loss, but they've lost only one. It was at Minnesota. And for some reason, like Minnesota's been great at Ohio State the last 4 years under Bob Motzko, 6-1-1. But at Pagula, he's not won. So I don't know if there's a science to it. Sometimes in any sport, you go into a certain arena and you don't feel it, and in another one you do. We'll see. Penn State's not, obviously, with their record in the conference, hasn't been as good this year. In the past couple of years, they've had really good teams, so it is a difficult place to go in. So it's understandable. We'll see what happens this weekend, but it does make it a little more interesting. Maybe gives Ohio State that little door, because if Minnesota was to get swept and they were to sweep Michigan, they're back on top. So interesting stuff coming down the run here.
So we are looking ahead at this point to the NCAA tournament. We're going to show people the pairwise rankings. We have a minute left in the show. So explain people really quickly, what are these and what do they tell us about who might make the tournament?
I mean, honestly, it's like the old BCS rankings for football. It's all computerized. So everything done, whether you win at home, win on the road, the higher team you beat, more impressive it is. Minnesota moved up from 9th to 5th last week because they swept the top 10 team in Ohio State. So they jumped up. Notre Dame went down a little bit because they lost one of their games to Wisconsin, who is in the 30s in the rankings. So it's all computerized. Right now, though, those 4 teams have a really good chance as long as they just don't lose out, especially the bottom. Minnesota and Michigan are in very good shape. Those other 2, really good shot.
And to remind people, 16 teams?
16, so you'd have a quarter of the field, Big Ten.